I think we'd all agree that Luton is one of the most diverse places in the UK, particularly culturally, with a substantial percentage identifying from a faith background other than Christianity. I was born in London, but I did most of my growing up in a large village on the south coast, where I would say about 98% of the population were white and British. And since moving to Watford when I was 17 and the last 14 years living in Luton, I've learnt an awful lot, with the population being so much more diverse. And that diversity is one of the things I really like about Luton. I've learnt so much more about how other faiths celebrate their festivals, particularly our Muslim friends. And the diversity we have here is something that should be celebrated. Of course, there are some people who find outsiders frightening. And today's reading reminds us, like the poor, outsiders are a part of our story. How should we react? And maybe it sometimes feels like that we are the outsiders. This story from Matthew that Ian read to us a few minutes ago is also told in Mark's Gospel. Both writers place it adjacent to a discourse about purity, and therefore about true belonging. It is a story about a woman who approaches Jesus directly. He is a Jewish rabbi, and this is a meeting fraught with purity taboos. And just to give it a bit of a setting, it's set in Tyre and Sidon, north of Galilee in southern Lebanon, a country that I'm sure we've all been holding in our prayers since that awful explosion in Beirut a couple of weeks ago. Such places beyond Jewish territory were diverse as a result of being centres of trade and travel. The woman was a Canaanite. She was a Gentile whose culture and faith was shaped by the land of her birth as a kind of First Nation inhabitant. So this key encounter takes place between Jesus and a female, with a non-Jew beyond Jesus' routine territory. He is prepared to travel both physically and socially in order to meet. And this woman may have been every bit as strange or frightening as some see refugees and asylum seekers in our culture. Jews and Canaanites are living adjacent. But it is Jesus who crosses over into their territory in order to have a real encounter with difference. We may well, particularly here in Luton, live adjacent to people from cultures and from faiths different from our own. But do we ever decide to cross over? How can we help our communities have real encounters that move us beyond what we read in the media? This suggests that real encounter with outsiders can be transformative. A couple of quick examples for you. As many of you are probably aware, I first lived in a flat once I moved to Luton. And it was a block, just a small block of 10 flats. And in one of these blocks was a Muslim family. And I remember one Eid, there was a knock at the door. I opened the door, and there was a young lad, about 5 years old at the time, with a plate of food from their celebrations. And he said, "We'd like to share this with you." And it turned out that they had gone round every flat in the block with a similar plate of food. And that's something they did every year at their various celebrations. And it certainly made me feel part of that celebration. And in return, I always popped round with some gifts and some food at Christmas and Easter, again sharing in our celebrations. And talking to the young lad's parents, they appreciated me doing that, as they felt it was very important that their son learned about other faiths. And another example that people may remember, particularly those of us from St Margaret's, is when we brought together the Cameo youth group from St Margaret's and St John's together with a local Muslim youth group. And both groups made a presentation to each other in their respective faiths, And what struck me that evening was how many similarities there were between us, far more than I had previously considered. Going back to our reading today, the woman uses two surprising phrases to address this rabbi. She recognises him as son of David, so she spots his Jewish credentials, which is something that's very important for Matthew, and she can speak respectfully to him. This affirms his ethnic and his cultural identity, in dialogue with other faiths and cultures that it is a respect that I've also experienced. Secondly, she uses the word Lord. This is also translated as Messiah. Understanding more than the so-called disciples, she recognises divine authority in Jesus. She asks him to make a difference in her child's life. She recognises that a promised future is becoming present through this encounter. This is a future that is no longer configured by the unruly forces summed up by the world demon. This woman is ahead of the game. Only when Jesus faces death in Jerusalem do we see the full impact of his coming and that sheer extent of his realm. The early Christians will begin to explore this as the mission extends into Gentile territory. But here this woman already recognises the answer to which the Council of Jerusalem will attend decades later. All are welcome through faith. We meet people on a journey of faith with a complex sets of identities. I meet people who offer me insights into Jesus who are still identifiably a member of another faith. Something that has particularly happened a lot since I've been working at Network Rail, where we do have a diverse workforce. And I think these encounters invite us to be attentive to the people we meet and to be prepared to have our categories about faith challenged by their witness. Some find the way that Jesus acts to be very shocking. There's no getting away from the fact that he likens a woman to a dog that only gets the scraps. The word used for dog is diminutive, perhaps used for a household pet. Nevertheless, it is still a dog. Some people would like to brush this out. Hard sayings in the New Testament make the likelihood of authenticity all that much greater. Why else would the early church have left it there, since it unsettles that picture we often have of a nice Jesus? This Canaanite woman, like so many, recognises that she does not fully belong. Yet even a scrap is better than nothing. She knows that even dogs find a place within the household. There is something within her that is rising up, which not only names her needs, but which fires her with persistence until she gets answers. She will not go away until she receives a sign of the future. The church is invited, like Jesus, to engage in unfamiliar territory with unfamiliar people. We are asked to notice who is an insider and who is an outsider. We are asked to really trust that God's kingdom does extend far beyond our categories. We are invited to engage in persistent, truthful, yet even bluntly honest conversations. Despite discomfort, such encounters still reveal faith, persistence, and ultimately the breaking in of the kingdom of heaven.